I want to talk about another Joker, the other Joker, Nikola Jokic, who just, you want to
Serbia
talk
is on
about,
fire right now.
bruh, you want to talk about a club to be in. Now that the Nuggets have won the finals in five, Nikola Jokic, finals MVP, first NBA player, so this is a club of one, first NBA player to ever lead all players in postseason points, rebounds, and assists. But here's where it gets good. He's one of 11 players with two MVPs and a finals MVP, joining Jordan, LeBron, Kareem, Wilt, Magic, Bird, Moses, Giannis, Steph, and Tim Duncan. Those are guys with two MVPs and a finals MVP. But I want to go back to something because I mentioned, man, you're so prolific. You like the Hamilton line. You write like you're running out of time. Um, you wrote a column for the Griot back in March that you and I have never discussed, and you weighed in on the a discussion that really irked me that was happening on television and on Twitter about whether or not there was racial bias in the NBA MVP voting, which, as we know, eventually went to Joel Embiid. But it was a pretty contentious debate about Jokic and whether or not he was deserving of a third straight MVP, not just because he hadn't achieved anything in the postseason, which, oh, by the way, neither has Joel Embiid, and because of the legacy of people who had won three straight, and did he belong in that club at the time? It looks real silly to me in hindsight, that criticism. But as you pointed out, no black player had done that in 50 years. The only player to do it was Larry Bird, was winning three straight. Now, before I ask you how you feel about that now, I just want to say this. What I love about the column, and I highly suggest everybody go back and read it because it still holds up, is much like most of your work, you use it as a teachable moment. You weren't talking as much about the merits or lack thereof of Nikola Jokic, but more so just about whiteness points and how, first of all, and I agree with this wholeheartedly, racism and race permeates every sector and every aspect of American society. That's one. But two, it's like in every walk of life, white people get extra credit. It's just a fact.
Yeah.
However, I don't think that applies to. So I don't know if multiple things can be true because even back then, yes, race is always a factor. And as you pointed out in the column, if it's not a factor in this conversation, that would make it the exception in America. That's number one, if not the planet.
The only
But
place
in this case,
in American life where it doesn't come
right.
in. Okay.
But having said that, and listen, I agree. We see eye to eye on this matter. Like, I'm a black man in America. Of course, I agree with that. But Nikola Jokic was and is a bad and it's like, this wasn't the great white hype or even the great white hope. This man was every bit as deserving of anybody else of MVP then. And now seeing what he's done in the postseason, I wonder how you feel about that conversation then, seeing what we've seen him do in the postseason with a complete team around him, now that he's the best player in the world.
Wow. He's now the best player in the world. He's on the best team in the world, but
I'm sorry. Well, let's back all the way up then. Who would you say is the best player in the world right now, if not Nikola Jokic? Or am I a prisoner of the moment, Touré?
I don't know if you're a prisoner of the moment, but I mean, so you're saying Nikola Jokic is better than LeBron James?
Right now, yes, absolutely. LeBron James will tell you that. Yes. Right now, yes. All time, no. Right now, yes.
So right now, okay. I mean, I think with this MVP conversation, as with so many things about race, you could narrow it to a tiny lens and go, no, I don't see racism. But when you expand it and you deal with actual nuance like an intelligent person, then certain things start to become clearer. No, Tyler Hero's not going to be on the NBA MVP list because he's white, right? Like, that's not happening. Most of the people who are in consideration for MVP are black. But if you look back through 10, 20 years, if you're good, it's not, and white, that's not enough. But if you're very, very good and white, it gives you a lift. There's a divide in that most of the players are black and
Right.
urban. Most of the sports writers and sports analysts are white and generally suburban. And, I think there is a bias that when a white person succeeds, they may not even realize what they're doing, but they're giving some extra points to that person. And thus you have someone like Steve Nash winning multiple MVPs. I mean, I grew up in Boston. I can attest to the brilliance of Larry Bird.
Right. Which is who I would compare Jokic to, by the way.
Yeah, but Steve Nash is winning MVPs in a world where Kobe Bryant is alive. Like, what?
But let's see. Okay, so if I can interject here, I hope this is a good enough point to interject. Here's my issue. So the Steve Nash thing continues to bother people. All right, when it's almost like there are years where, okay, I don't know, and Michael Jordan took that personally. There are years when, Karl Malone won MVP and Michael Jordan didn't. And we're like, Michael Jordan, like, there are certain players in NBA history who you can make a case could have won every year, whether that's Shaq, whether that's Kobe, whether that's LeBron, whether that's Jordan. It's like, so there are other people who had better regular seasons and weren't better all-time players. Steve, I've never appreciated how Steve Nash gets shit on because, the Shaq should have won that. And so I'll go a step further. And this is where it becomes not just black and white Touré, but just color in general. Do you remember the colorism conversation around Steph Curry when he was the first unanimous MVP in NBA history? And there were people who were pissed that Steph Curry did something that Jordan never did or that LeBron never did, and attributed Steph Curry being the first unanimous MVP to him being light-skinned and the light-skinned privilege that he had. And now in hindsight, Steph Curry is one of the greatest players in NBA history and deserved it, and just so happened to be the first unanimous, and that became a skin color thing. And so the reason why, listen, everything you said is absolutely true in general. And the NBA and basketball conversation should be no exception. So I want to reiterate that I agree with your overall premise. But in the case of Nikola Jokic, I think it's a couple of things at work here, a couple of things that were at work. Because again, now I think it's clear to most people that he was deserving to be an MVP. And that, okay, if you don't think he's the best player in the world, that's fine. He's at least in the conversation in a way that he wasn't before, now that he's got a championship and a finals MVP. I'm saying that I think it has a lot to do with Steve Nash, who's the poster child for what you're talking about. And I think the people conflate regular season with postseason still, which really bothers me. It's a regular season award. So because if Jokic had won a championship, I don't think there's that much pushback against him winning a third straight if he won a championship before this year. And lastly, I do think basketball, because it's a black sport, or in theory a black sport, the majority black players, let's call it that. Yeah. It lends itself to cultural discussion and debate that oftentimes, to your point, can lack the nuance or broader understanding necessary to have intelligent cultural and discussion debates. Because again, what you said and the way you said it, I had no problem with it. What I had a problem with was it became something that delegitimized Jokic's validity as a two-time MVP and a worthy three-time MVP, as if he were some, like I said before, some great white hype, instead of just one of the best big men of all time, which thankfully now we can put that to rest, a discussion about how good he is because of what he's done in the postseason. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, look, the guy's brilliant, and you're just noticing almost every play he's making it happen. He's making that pass. He's making that block. He's in the lane and makes them rethink what they're going to do. I mean, he's involved in almost every play, and it's ridiculous. I'm not saying the guy's not great. I'm saying that when white players are great and they're close to winning MVP, they tend to get it. It's like if we can give it to a white guy reasonably, he's going to get
But
it.
Touré, why wasn't Jokic just better than Embiid? Why
Why
can't it be
wasn't
just as
he?
simple as that? Why couldn't he have had a better look? Jokic isn't on social media. Jokic doesn't have endorsements. Jokic don't even want to go to the parade. He won't go watch his horses back in Serbia. Jokic doesn't give a shit about anything that we care about. He's not warm and fuzzy. He's not relatable. But why is it so far fetched? Was my problem. That to me, honestly, a lot of this discussion came from, and not on your part, but ignorance.
Yeah.
Because again, you extrapolated this and made it an American thing, which is, again, you made it a teachable moment about the truth about American society in general. The people who were debating this on NBA Twitter and on television, to me, this came from a place of ignorance. Ignorance insofar as like you're not watching Nikola Jokic close enough. Because why is it such a stretch to say that no, he's the best player, he's better than Embiid, or he's having a better season than Embiid? I just didn't see him getting propped up was my issue. I saw somebody who was damn good. You're right that they're always going to get the tiebreaker. They're always going to get that tiebreaker. But in this instance, I didn't see that at play.
I'm not saying the guy ain't dope. He's clearly dope. But when white players get close to winning the MVP, they tend to win the MVP. If you can vote for them, they're getting the nod. They're getting the benefit of the doubt. They're getting the 6 over the half dozen, a lot. And that doesn't mean that Jokic isn't great, isn't a Hall of Famer, isn't, an incredible player. But I mean, in a world of Shaq, Kobe, LeBron, they could win it every year. And I think some people find that boring. Right.
True.
And
I think boredom was the other factor. I think there was some boredom with Jokic, just like there was with Giannis. There was some. There becomes fatigue. I think fatigue is the one thing I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up in this. Is that there's fatigue with voting for somebody who again hasn't scaled the mountain. And now that he has,
it killed me when I saw a tweet saying, "Oh, in the end, Jimmy Butler did play like Michael Jordan's son."
Oh, yeah. There was some serious, some questionable decision making on the part of Jimmy Butler at the end of that game. But actually,
he did not show up big in Game 5 like you would have thought and hoped.
He didn't show up big in the second half of the Celtics series like the way you thought you'd have showed. Like he was self-checked a lot of times. He passed up a lot of shots that I was like, why are you passing in this situation?
There was a lot of drive into the lane and then sort of step around and look for who I can kick it out to. I'm like,
hey, thanks so much for kicking it with your main man, Michael Smith. Be sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel, but also subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Rate it, review it, tell your friends about it. Oh, and be sure to follow me on social media.